And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wild Ginger Running live show. It's Wednesday evening, it's 8:30 p.m, and if you're joining us live, then welcome. We have the absolutely incredible endurance and ultra runner for Colombia, Eoin Keith, with us tonight.
Hello,
Eoin.
hello.
So I'll just introduce Eoin to you before we get started with the questions. So Eoin won the Spine Race in 2016 and set a course record in that year. And then in the same year, he then won the Northern Traverse, 190 miles across the UK. Then he won that race again in 2018. And then in that same year, he also had a crack at the Barkley Marathons. So absolutely incredible long distance runner here. So first of all, Eoin, just for anybody who's not come across you before, where are you from and how did you get into running?
I grew up in Cove, which is in Cork in Ireland, and I'm now living in Dublin, so I'm from Ireland. I got into running a very roundabout way. I actually had no sporting background whatsoever as a kid. My only sport as a teenager was pitch and putt, mini golf, which turned to golf as I became an adult. Then I literally got dragged out into the hills by some of my college friends who were into hill walking. And so then I got enthused about hill walking and became I had to choose between hill walking and golf because they both took all day, and realised that golf is a game where you just count your mistakes, so you could never have a perfect day, whereas hill walking, you can have a perfect day. So off I went into the hill walking world. Some of my friends in hill walking then were getting into mountain marathons and things like that, and I made the mistake of volunteering for one of those and enjoyed it enormously, so that got me into the more competitive aspect of things, and I am very competitive, so that really appealed to me. And then the same bunch of people who dragged me into those worlds were doing the Dublin City Marathon in 1998, and I, as I usually do, stupidly agreed to give it a go as well. And that's where I discovered I could run. The last long training run, which was a 20-miler, I outran them all, and these are the people who I used to look up to as being my fit friends. So I adjusted my targets, and I ran my first marathon in a sub 3-hour time. So that's when I realised, I can actually do this running thing, and it all kind of took off from there. The same bunch of friends dragged me out hill running then in the local hill running scene, and I immediately fell in love with that. And it's all grown from that naturally.
Because you used to do a lot of adventure racing, is that right?
Yeah, actually it was the same bunch of people again, the same bunch of lunatics found an adventure race in Ireland in the year 2000, which was actually the first expedition-length adventure race in the UK, up in Northern Ireland, and we entered 2 teams, and none of them finished, but half of my team made it to finish along with some others, and we just had a great time. So I fell in love with that as well. It introduced me to lots of other sports like mountain biking and kayaking, canoeing, and things like that, which I also took up along the way and did tons of over the years.
Wow, it sounds like you didn't have time to do any work or a job or anything. Do you have a job as well?
I do. I actually have a full-time job and have had most of the time. At the moment I work and have done for nearly 10 years at this stage for the IT department in a medical college, the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, which is a very nice place to work. And it's a nice regular job, which is regular hours, which allows me to schedule in training around it and so on. And I actually like the fact that I work full time and I don't depend on running for an income. It takes the whole pressure off that. Running is pure leisure. I don't need to do it. I don't have to say or think anything because I have no dependencies on it. So it's just pure fun. And I much prefer that setup, to be honest. So if I was given the opportunity to be a full-time runner, I'd actually be very reluctant to take it for that reason.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You do seem like you come across really chilled out and really just happy to do whatever. So yeah, maybe that's a good option. But we'll ask you more about how you actually fit the training in later. But I just wondered what the trail and ultra running scene is like in Ireland, because I've read another lady's book, Moira O'Sullivan. She seemed to have a great career adventure racing. Lovely lady. And yeah, so I just wondered what the scene is like over there. Should we all come and have a go?
Yes, definitely. The scene is great. The trail running scene has always been great in the entire time I've been there, and it's grown. When I first started, you got an average of 70 people turning up to the races. These days it's more like 200, maybe 300 on a very big day. And there's a very vibrant scene in the Dublin area and down in the southwest of Munster, and there's a growing scene in the southeast as well. So with about 2,000 to 3,000 people register in the organisation every year. So that's a good scene, and there's a good variety of runs, and it's very social as well. The first thing I noticed when I started running was one of the most important details for any race is the prize giving, which was always in a pub. And, there was the sessions afterwards are always long and vibrant and great fun. And that's actually one of the ways I got introduced to ultra running, was meeting people after the hill runs. Some of them were really old school ultra runners, and I used to listen to them regaling the stories of these mad things like 24-hour races, thinking, God, that is enormously crazy but really interesting all the same. So, very vibrant scene. The ultra running scene has been growing massively in the last 5 or 6 years. When I first started ultra running in Ireland, there was literally only one race, about what's now the Morris Mullins Ultra, and you get about 20 people turning up per year. I think this year we had about 350 people at the very same race, which shows, it's a 1,000% increase, I think, roughly in numbers. So that's pretty impressive stuff. As well, the depth is growing as well. You've people across the board. I used to be able to turn up and be very confident that I'd win a race, whereas these days it would need to be a very long race indeed for me to have any kind of confidence of, getting on the podium, never mind winning, that the standards are up and up, which is great, and across the board as well.
That's awesome. I've got a first question from one of my patrons, Guy Greatorex, and he would like you to recommend the best race in Ireland for us to come and do.
Oh, it depends what you're into. Well, the Morris Mullins has the tradition, and it's easy to get to. Anything around Dublin is very easy to travel to, obviously. And there's quite a few races in the area now. If you're picking up for scenery, it's another tough one. There's a few races up in the Mourne Mountains, and they're gorgeous. There's one down in Kerry, which I really like. Kerry Way Ultra, I think it's also probably the longest one, and that's a real low-key one as well, and very, very nice. I think there's a new one coming up this year in Wicklow as well, which looks interesting, but I don't have the full details of that yet. But you need to research and do it. Plus, we have some nice flat ultras as well. The Belfast 24 was the World Championship a year and a half ago. That's a really nice one as well. So there's a lot going on. So,
amazing. Oh, good recommendations. Thank you. Another one of my patrons has just said on the live chat, there's loads of people on the live chat. I'll read some of them out to you in a minute, Ian. But yep. Kurt Steed says he did the Wicklow Way 50 last year, and it was pretty wild, he said.
Yeah, that had a good entry last year. We had Patriska Baranovsky was in the 100, and she didn't even win that. Even Knockton won the 100. So it was a good depth there that year. I happened to be off an O-man at the time, so I didn't get the race myself, but I did the 50 for the previous 2 years and won it. Luckily got it in time, because I wouldn't have won it this year. I would have been fast.
Yeah, well, I hear I think Robbie Britain is coming over to do the Wicklow Way. I don't know if he's doing the 50 or the 100. Maybe the 100, knowing him.
He's doing the full Wicklow Way, because there's actually a couple of different races on the Wicklow Way. The Wicklow Way would be the equivalent to the Pennine Way, in that it's Ireland's most popular walking route, and oldest as well, I think. And so there's one race which is the full length start to finish off the Wicklow Way, which is one of my favourites, and I hold the record for that one. And I think that's the one Robbie is coming over to do. So it'll be very interesting to see can he beat my record, and if so, by how much, because I regard it as one of my better records. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting. I'm hoping to meet him soon enough. I think he's going to come over for a recce, so that should be good.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. Oh, will you put some posts out on social media so that we can follow you guys together?
Yeah. Hopefully.
Brilliant. Cool. Okay. So you did touch on this just before. You said about how the shorter races you have difficulty winning and you need to have a longer race. It's just a question from Guy Greatorex, one of my patrons. He says, why? I've got the question just here. I'm just going to put it up. The why. He says, why? Let me just delete that. So he says, why do you enter all these really long, epic challenges? Is it for the actual challenge so you can test yourself? Or is it so you can travel and see amazing places? Or is it something else altogether?
It's both of those things. And it's also because it's a horrific attribute of mine is that I've over the years been pushing out the distances that I'm racing, and as I push out the distance I find I get more competitive the longer it gets, and I'm hoping to find the limits where I fall off the other side and I get less competitive because it's too long, except I haven't found it yet. So at the moment the longest races I've done have been the ones I've been most competitive at, which is I call it horrific because they tend to be the toughest as well.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it'd be great to be a world-class 100-meter sprinter because, your race is over in 10 seconds. If you don't have a bad one, you can do another one the next day. Whereas, ultra running takes months of preparation, so on and so forth. So you pile a whole lot more into each race. But the upsides are, you get to these awesome places, and it's a great way of seeing the world. And I definitely do pick races to see interesting places. Over the years, adventure racing has been a superb way of seeing really interesting parts of the world. You can do that with ultra trail running as well. I was in Patagonia last weekend, I think, or the weekend before.
Wow.
And, I was in Oman for the first time back in December. So, getting to see new and interesting environments, which otherwise I wouldn't have a direct reason for going. And that's always good.
That's fantastic. That's as good as reason as any, because you've been doing some amazing races. So the Spine Race, which is 268 miles along the Pennine Way, then the Northern Traverse, 190 miles along the Wainwright Coast to Coast Challenge, and then the Barkley Marathons as well. They're all endurance races, and now we know why you do the endurance races. But what do you like about being out there for so long?
There's a lot of like it because I come from the hill walking / mountaineering background. I have a lot of mountain skills, and I've always enjoyed the what would you call it, the mountain environment, and just being out there and the challenge of looking after yourself in the mountain environment, and going out there, navigating for yourself, being safe, looking after yourself, knowing the right gear, knowing what to do if you get into tricky situations, how to get yourself out of them, being totally responsible. And some of my favorite moments are like up in the Cheviot Hills at the end of the Spine, when you're completely on your own. It's the middle of January, the middle of the night. There's no one else out there, and if they are out there, they belong to the race. But generally, you have an entire mountain range guaranteed to yourself, and you can be terrified by that, but I find it awesome and epic, and I love it. I embrace it, and I really like that aspect to it. So that aspect of the challenges definitely appeals to me. And the harder they get, the more challenging they are. The more rewarding they are to do. And that's something that the famous Laz very much emphasizes. If a challenge, to be worth doing, a challenge should be significantly tough enough to make it worthwhile to actually complete it. And I agree with Laz on that one.
Definitely. He definitely does make a really, really good challenge, doesn't he, Laz, from the Barkley Marathon?
He does. He's an evil genius when it comes to challenges, is Laz.
Yeah, and just because you've done these three really impressive races, like the Spine Race, Northern Traverse, Barclays, and the UTMB you've done as well, how do you train for such long distances all the time? I mean, do you pick like an A race and go, I'll just do 2 of these this year, or and how does your week look? Like, can you just tell us your secret?
It's no big secrets. And I've learned more and more over the years, and probably my biggest learning over the years is to question absolutely every piece of wisdom out there. So anything I say should be questioned, because I don't even say question everything I say. Everything should be questioned, because there's a lot of what I would call questionable information out there in the running world, and I've done the opposite to a lot of conventional thinking and found that the opposite actually works better. So in terms of how I'd approach races, generally I only look about a year in advance at most. We'll pick a few races, or usually over years, but often I don't nail them down so much, but I usually have a schedule of some kind. It usually works out at about 4 or 5, maybe 6 A races a year. Sometimes extra ones get lumped in. I don't have a minimum or a maximum number. It's all whatever I feel like doing, and whatever I can squeeze in with work holidays, and fitting in a real life with my wife, etc. But whatever I can manage, whatever seems doable. In terms of planning the week. Again, I don't have any written schedules, but I know you have an understanding of the theory of running training, which is basically, do some fast work, do some slow work. I think for ultras, what I think is really good is to do maximize the weekend time and have maximum time off. So I tend to do a minimum of one super long run at the weekends, which I'd count as about 6 hours in my case, or maybe 7. Last year I was doing most weekends back-to-back long runs, where we one after the other. And they're good things to do. I've switched up a bit this year for various reasons, and I'm doing a bit more emphasis on speed work because I can feel my speed eating away. So I'm dialing down the distances, but dialing up the intensity of it. But I think listening to you, 1 or 2 days a week would be speed work days. They could be going to my running club and doing some intervals with them, or it could be what I call a tempo run session, which is a sort of a known route I do that takes about an hour and a half, run at fairly much maximum what I can pump out in the training run. And then I'll mix in the easy days between that. These days I'm trying to do 1 or 2 days a week of cycling, and quite often that can be on a turbo trainer. Although I much prefer being out on the roads. I'm very lucky where I live. There's some great roads for cycling nearby, which are into the Wicklow Mountains and really fabulous cycling roads. But I do think mixing in cycling is extremely beneficial to running, far more than the other way around, in fact. And I find it really improves my hill running to do a lot of hill cycling. And in the last 3 months, I've really felt the benefit of that as it happens. So I've noticed that plan, but I kind of, on a week-by-week basis, will just figure it out as I go and do a lot of it on feel. And another thing I don't do is I don't measure the distance and the time. I might measure one, I might measure the other, but I don't measure both. And that way I don't convince myself I've had a bad training session with metrics. I don't do paralysis by analysis. If I feel like I've had a good run, I'll know it. If I feel like I'm having a bad day, okay, it's an easy day. Don't worry about it. If I feel like I'm having a really bad day, I'll often back off, but that doesn't happen very often. So keeping the enthusiasm up, I think, is important, and just mixing it in a sort of a knowledgeable way. And I think it's useful to just, rather than have a plan, understand why plans exist and what the plans are trying to do, and then you can build your own plan for yourself. And the thing about ultra running in general is I've talked to many top class ultra runners over the years of various kinds, and particularly with the flat ultra runners who tend to be more focused, and they don't have to worry about the skill set, so they can isolate directly on the fitness. And there are nearly as many plans as there are ultra runners, to be honest. There's no obvious right way of doing it. So equally, there's no obvious wrong way. Some people are very distance emphasized, some people are very speed emphasized, and they can both be highly effective. So, I think the main thing is to put in intelligent hard work, is how I put it.
And how do you fit in all this intelligent hard work around your full-time job then? Do you have to get up really early in the morning?
No, I'm a very much which one is the one where it's the owl who goes to sleep at night. Yeah, I'm an owl rather than a lark, so I hate getting up in the morning. The only time I really get up enthusiastic in the morning would be the morning of a race. Apart from that, no, I don't want to get up. So I do my training in the evening. So I come home from work and pretty much turn around and go straight out the door and do whatever training it is before I have a chance to settle down and go, I'm too tired to go out. I try not to let that happen. So it's a continuum. I want to build in that routine. It becomes harder to break the routine. So I kind of, like, my work day runs into the training day, then that's all over by whatever, 9 or 10 in the evening, and that's the downtime then. So it kind of builds around that, which leaves me a small window to fit in my reading, internet, watching, whatever it is.
Netflix.
Yeah. No, that's what went out the window. I used to be a big television watcher, but that's gone now because something had to give, and it was television, and that kind of thing went out the door.
Yeah. And so do you do a lot of running with a head torch on then, presumably, because it'll be getting dark most days in the winter when you're out for a run after work?
On the hills, yeah. Although I lived in a different house before, and I was on slightly different routes, which were a lot of fire roads, and I could run those. I've good night vision, so I could run those without the head torch. torch and used to occasionally scare the living daylights out of dog walkers and things like that.
What's this black shadow coming towards me?
Yeah, well, they wouldn't even see me. I'd just go flying past and they'd jump out of their skin. But whereas my night vision's good enough, so I'd be aware of their presence as I was approaching. And if they were lucky, I might manage to get a cough out or something.
Yeah.
But these days I'm on more technical ground than narrower trails, so I do actually pop on the head torch just to not brain myself by tripping over something. But even then, I can remember running along on a snowy night with a full moon and having no head torch and being amazed at the visibility and running along a really technical trail at great speed. And so a friend of mine coming in the opposite direction, and he had no torch either, but more impressively, he was biking. He was on a mountain bike. So I said, there's always someone more mad.
Brilliant. That's amazing. But I've heard runners, who put the big petzl nails on their head, and they've been running together with a partner, and somebody else has been running towards them, and they've been a bit like sleep deprived or whatever, and they've been convinced that it's a car coming towards them on the fells because they were running so fast down this hill. And they're like, there's a car.
This is one of the advantages of being in Ireland, is that the hills are relatively empty compared to England, for sure. So even where I am, which is South Dublin, and the hills are on the foot of a city of 1 million people, during winter there's generally nobody up there. I'd say maybe once every month I might meet someone on the hills. So it's great. You're extremely unlikely to meet anyone. So it's really cool in that way. So a lot of space to go out without head torches and not get scared by meeting other people or
and not scare too many people. Yeah. And just you're just saying that it's nice to be out there with not many people. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the mental aspect of training for such long races, because it's totally different, isn't it, than running a half marathon or a marathon, going for days and days.
Yeah. I think the mental aspect of running multi-days is extremely interesting, to say the least, and it varies a lot depending on the type of race. I find that the multi-dayers on the trails can be great. Really, it doesn't take a lot more motivation than just being out there and enjoying the journey, and having plenty to do, just finding your way, staying on track, and staying safe and so on. Whereas I also do the flat ultras, which are a totally different game, and not many people do both. You do have the likes of Robbie, who's good at both, and Johan Steen's probably the best in the world at doing both. But I do 24-hour races competitively, and I also do 6-day races very occasionally. I've only done 2, but they for me are actually the most mentally challenging, even though they're in as safe a terrain as you can get. You're just running whatever, a 1 mile or a 1 kilometer-ish loop around and around and around. But to do that for 6 days is actually the most mentally terrifying thing I've done, and it's probably that actually scares me more than any other race, believe it or not, because it's so mentally tough to do. It's you go through all sorts of pain barriers mentally and physically, and it's hugely hard work. But it's like I was saying at the start, unfortunately it's one of those ones where I found myself to be extremely competitive. That's what draws me back, this thought that maybe I can go back and actually run a real world-class distance and see what happens.
Yeah, so you just make yourself do whatever you're really good at.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. But can you even train for that? Like, there's a question from Sally Gilson, and she says, how do you deal with the sleep deprivation? She says you've done several races that mean running on very little sleep. Can you even train for that? Like, how do you do that?
Well, the theory I've read on it is you can't, but I seem to be getting better at it over the years through experience or something. But it's not something I train for, definitely not. Everything I've read said if you try and train for it, you're more likely to actually cause yourself just to go into more overtraining mode and just become too tired and not be very productive. But it's one of those things, you just get out and do it. And what I actually try and do is factor out the real bad sleep deprivation by managing my sleep as well as I can, because I have found myself in situations where I need to get to a certain point and it's too dangerous to stop before that point. And if I'm sleep deprived, it's just a horrific time. And I really don't like doing that, so I've usually overscheduled sleep if I can. And you learn little tricks, like a 10-minute power nap can get you 5 or 6 hours of reasonable, comfortable performance after it and things like that. And, you have to you have to learn your own body and how much sleep is going to be effective. And, I find that 2 hours sleep in 24 will last you well for a 3 or 4 day race and things like that. But I know from adventure racing that you need to up that to maybe 3 to 4 hours sleep over 24-hour period if you're doing a 6 or 7 day race and things like that. But again, it's one of the things, you look at other people, see what they can do, you look at you try and feel it out for yourself and over time build up the experience. But it's not really something you can train for. It's just one of those things you have to go out and learn the hard way.
Yeah, so you can't train for sleep deprivation, but in a way you can sort of practice it and get better every time at managing your own sleep deprivation.
Yeah, and you can learn the tricks of the trade, and you can certainly learn not to fear it as much and how to manage it a bit better. I think that's the best you're likely to get out of it. And I've improved over the years, and I don't fear it anywhere near as much as I used to. I'd still put it as the most uncomfortable aspect of multi-day ultra running, but I actually have managed to factor it out as a discomfort from certainly for most of my recent spines and northern traverses. Although the northern traverses where I've ended up pushing it once or twice recently, I accidentally did the first northern traverse with no sleep, and what I'm very bad at is I intended to sleep at the third aid station, but when I got there, the weather was so bad that they hadn't been able to put any tents out, and the aid station was turned into a van, and the van was like a yacht at sea. It was rocking so much in the winds. So it's like, I'm not going to be able to sleep here. I'll just have to get out and go on. So I ended up doing the whole race with no sleep, which was not what I was planning to do, but I ended up doing it anyway because it was too dangerous or too unsleepable to stop. So you just do what you have to do. And then the last Northern Traverse, going to the same aid station, I thought I was okay, but the last hour going into it, the same spot, I was having mental hallucinations to myself. I was talking to my imaginary friend, who I knew was an imaginary friend, who was also me, kind of thing, as I was running along. Running the last couple of times I was there, which were non-existent, and things like this. So this kind of thing happens all the time. And even in Spider, I factored it out pretty well this year, and got the right sleep at the right time. And that was actually part of my tactics for racing, because I knew Eugenie was pushing his sleep and he'd be in trouble. And that's the way it actually worked out at the end, where I was deliberately choosing not to get into that kind of trouble. And even though I was going to be slower, I was going to be more effective, as my thinking. And it did work out from a race perspective that way. But even at the end, I was going over the Cheviots towards the end, and I was having the same 2 or 3 imaginary friends there having arguments and conversations. And even when the sun came up, which normally wakes me up, I remember going up the last big hill there and thinking, God, this is lovely. I remember I was here with my wife, and it was great, and we had such a nice time. And of course I was never there with my wife. That was just a imaginary thing. So
that is hilarious.
It is, yeah. The mind does strangest things. And mine are moderate compared to some of the things I've heard other people hallucinating about. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really hilarious. I can't believe that you thought you were talking to your wife when your wife wasn't even there. But that's nice, isn't it? Like it is. It wasn't like someone else, or it was not horrible. Like some people, when they have sleep deprivation, they have all sorts of demons come to them. But yours sound quite nice. So it sounds quite fun.
Okay, there's definitely has been a lot worse, and people definitely get crazier ones. Mine are quite benign, and I tend to know about them, as in I know they're sleep monsters. I have the arguments anyway, but I know what they are. If you know what I mean. So I'll be having arguments with my imaginary friends about the fact that we need to get there faster, because then we'll all go away and we can get back to being happy.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's super. This leads me really nicely to a question from Kurt Steege, who says, does Eoin have any tricks for maintaining concentration on these super long runs? So how do you maintain concentration when you've been running for hours? Like on something like the Barkley Marathons, where you've really got to concentrate. Can you just take us through that?
Yeah, well, the Barkley was probably the first lap of the Barkley I found to be the most mentally exhausting experience I've had in about a decade, because it takes so much concentration, which means in some ways it's easier because you have so much to do. You don't have to think about what you're thinking about. You have this massive job to do in the Barkley, which is to work out where you're going, read lads' instructions, and try and you relate them to what's going on the ground. Try and follow the map, and when you're a newbie, especially, relate what's going on the ground to what's going on the not super quality map, but good enough. Then you start realizing that lads' instructions make sense after a while, but make no sense before you read them. But after you've made all the mistakes, you realize, okay, it sort of makes sense, yeah. But you start trying to get into his mind and put it all together. And then at the same time, knowing that I'd be trying to get out in the second lap, and the year I did it, the second lap was the reverse direction, so I was concentrating on being able to find everything backwards as I was going forwards, and knowing that I was probably going to be the one who was going to have to do that navigating if I got out in the second lap, and to be happy with doing that and be in the dark as well. So there was a huge amount to take on, and it was very mentally exhausting. It was noticeable, actually. There was a runner there who was an old adventure racing friend of mine, and she was also a navigator, and she'd done Barkley 3 or 4 times, but I was a much faster runner, so I'd run away and do my stuff and try and work out how I was doing, and maybe half an hour later she'd run past, because she knew what she was doing. She didn't have to put in all the concentration, but it just shows what a difference it makes when you know what you're doing and you don't have to concentrate as much in terms of speed. So, but then the payback was in the second lap, where I picked up 3 or 4 passengers who were happy to let me do the navigating, and I was happy to have them along because extra sets of eyes to find the books, and a micro detail is always useful, and company is always much better to be lost in the middle of nowhere with people than lost in the middle of nowhere on your own with nobody around. So I'm happy to have people, even if I'm doing the navigating. That's grand. And then we picked up Jamil Khoury, who was very experienced, and he knew, apart from when we picked him up where he was completely lost, but I did find the book from there. But he showed us the rest of the course because we knew we were going to time out, so we just had a great time wandering around, and Jamil was happy to be tour guide, showing us all the little tricks of finding your way around. So, but then on the second lap, I was probably more physically exhausted than I'd been at any other time. So lap 1 was the mental exhaustion, lap 2 was the physical exhaustion. It was an interesting combination of experiences, to say the least. So more broadly speaking, what do I do to keep myself concentrating in the multi-day races? In the trails, it's actually easier because you usually have jobs to do, which is find your way, follow the maps or follow the course. Don't trip over stuff, looking around at all the interesting scenery. There's usually great scenery, thankfully. On the flat ones, it's actually harder because you have different things to do. And the motivation varies a lot more. Usually early in a race, it would be pacing and watching my pacing and concentrating and putting out exactly the right pace that I want to do based on feel and all, listening to my body and listening to the effort I'm putting in, at the same time watching the pace and reading the lap times and working it all out in my head. What does that mean for pace? Am I on target? Am I going too fast? And then later in these events, it tends to be, what's my position? Who's in front? Who's behind? Who do I need to stay in front of? Who can I catch? And so on. And that competitive aspect and the racing aspect is something I thoroughly enjoy. And usually late in a race, I'll be very much racing, and it'll be all about the racing aspect, irrespective of whether it's trail or whether it's flat. But the racing very much keeps me engaged. It's one of the main reasons I do these events, is to be as competitive as possible. And it's not necessarily about winning. It could be racing for 45th versus 46th or whatever, but just to be racing, that's, and being competitive. I love that. And that keeps me motivated in pretty much every race, no matter what it is.
Yeah, that's a good way to keep the concentration up, isn't it? All those little things to start with, and then where am I in the race? Yeah, sounds like you've got a lot of experience, and I think that there's nothing to be said for just getting out there and doing it and getting this hard-won experience, isn't there? You just got to do it.
Yeah, and it's one thing I always say to people, it's just the old Nike slogan, just do it. Don't ever question about whether you should do things. If you want to do something, just get out and do it. It's as simple as that. And it doesn't matter how hard it is, it doesn't matter how big the race. You don't have to build up to it. You just launch yourself straight into it. It's a hobby, it's fun. So the worst thing that happens is you don't finish, and so
Yeah.
what? It's usually better to try something and fail and go again than to not try and then have a go. The experience of the first one is far more valuable than waiting until you think you're ready. And that's definitely something I've learned over the years. Probably my most tactically badly run 24-hour race was my very first one, but it was also the one I learned most on for exactly the same reasons. You learn so much by getting out there. If you get a bunch of failures, then your learning experiences are great. You'll be dying to go out and correct them all for the second go around.
Yeah. So get out there, do it, fail it, and go
Yeah.
again. There's no shame in that.
Exactly.
I'm just going to show some pictures of your Barkleys, because this is you at the Barkleys last year. You have a number plate in your hand which says Egypt on it.
Yeah.
Why did you take such a numbered plate?
Well, the 181C is the legitimate part of that. 181 is the Irish number plate for 2018, first half of the year. C is my home county of Cork. And then the Barkley bit is anyone who does Barkley is an idiot, as Laz will happily tell you. And of course, anyone who watches Fire Attention know that the Irish for an idiot is an Egypt. So it's a very Irish plate. So that's the Egypt from Cork. That's me.
That's wonderful. And how much are you allowed to tell us about how to get into the Barkley Marathons? Because you didn't get in. Did you try again to get in for 2019 this year?
Yes and no, but there's a lot of information out there, and I'm not going to make it any easier for people. But there's a huge amount of information out there. Quite a lot of it is hidden in plain sight. That's all I'd say.
And so, did you apply this year to go again?
Yes and no. That's all I'd
say. Because I'm just going to.
But in the end, I ended up going. That's the key factor.
I'm going to put another picture up of you actually. Oh no, that's the spine race. You on the Barkleys, and this is you. I'm guessing it's at the end because you're sat below a tree and you've got. I think it looks like a space blanket on you, but I don't know if that is your map. Maybe. Yeah. So you look quite tired there. So what can you remember what that photo is and when it was taken and what you were doing?
Is that the one of me shaking Laz's hand by any chance, or is that a different one?
Oh no, it's just you with your poles sort of like laid down by a tree.
Yeah, that's just right at the end. Just basically being exhausted. As I said, I hadn't been that physically exhausted in a long time, and one of those reasons were I had broken my collarbone out there on the third book of 13. So I'd done most of that lap with a broken collarbone. So that's doubly exhausting. And one of the reasons it was doubly exhausting is because I couldn't. It was getting warmer and warmer after the sun came up, but because I had a broken collarbone, I wasn't easily able to strip my gear off. So I was actually overheating on top of everything else. So I arrived in quite exhausted.
Wow.
And a little bit of pain from the collarbone as well.
Yeah. And so do you want to do the Barkley Marathons again? Will we be seeing you on the start line in future races, do you think?
I would say it was one of the great experiences of my life. So yeah, I would like to go again and have another go. And the key really would be to get the weather gods to be a bit more cooperative. This year was a bad year as well, so I was kind of glad not to be there in a lot of ways, because I would have run into exactly the same problems, hopefully without the broken collarbone, but it would have been the same with regards to horrific weather, possibly even worse than we got last year. So you need a lot of luck as well on top of everything else, because you need a complete skill set to go anywhere in the Barkley. But I would like to see just how far I can get into it. It's funny, it's a classic ultra running thing. You think before the Barkley, well, it's got this reputation that, I could do this, I've done that, I have the skills, blah, 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 blah. Surely I have some chance of getting around. And everyone, I think that's why we're idiots. Everyone thinks they can do it, and then you get there and reality strikes, and suddenly you start to realize that, geez, one lap is actually pretty hard. Never mind doing 5. and you realize it's quite an achievement that maybe this is way out of range, and then a couple of months later you start forgetting why it's so hard. You think, well, maybe I can go back and I'm fitter now and I know what I'm doing, so with the knowledge I have, surely I can go a bit higher. So yeah, the easier tree is coming back, so I think I would like to go back and give it another go, but thinking that and actually managing to get there and do it is an entirely different thing.
Yeah, because people can get a bit obsessed by it, can't they? I know Jamil Khoury is really obsessed by it, and he goes out and he makes a film every time, and it's really incredible. He keeps going back.
Yeah, and he's not the only one. There's a few keep going back. Gary Robbins is totally obsessed.
Yeah.
Johan has been there quite a few times now as well, and these are world class athletes who are banging their heads off a brick wall.
Yeah, I know.
It's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And sometimes, one of the most interesting people I met there was Mike Wardian, because he was probably the fastest runner there. He's a world silver medalist at 100k. He's seriously fast.
Yeah, he's just done that fastest known time in Israel.
Yeah, but he hasn't got one lap at the Barkley.
Really?
It just shows speed is only one aspect of what you need for the Barkley.
Speed is probably the least good aspect for the Barkley. You just need to be going very slowly for the Barkley and go in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go in the right direction. People, have got further than Mike Wardy, which just shows, speed is only part of it. Yeah, what a friend of mine out there said, you need to complete toolbox. Every tool in the toolbox. If you're missing any of them, you're doomed. You certainly won't get the 5 laps, because that last lap will be done on your own. So if you can't navigate and you can't take care of yourself, you have no chance whatsoever.
Yeah, no chance whatsoever. Well, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see who goes next year. I think the UK eye has sort of turned onto the Barkleys now, hasn't it? With Nikki Spinks going over this year, and James Elson from Centurion Running, and then some other people from Britain going over as well. So yeah, I think everyone wants to be back next year, but maybe they will, maybe they won't. You never know with Laz.
Yeah, it's all up to Laz in the end. I know who I'd like to see going over, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about your gear now, because we've talked a lot about your training, your physical and mental. And we're going to touch upon food and drink before we go as well, because there's a question about fat adaption as well from John Gardner. But before we touch on that, I just want to talk about your gear, because obviously you're running a really long way. Here's a picture of you in the spine race just here. And you've got all your gear on there. You've got like everything on. It must be raining. You've got waterproof trousers, shoes, poles, pockets, like drinks with your backpack, and a full waterproof on there. How do you manage your gear so well and not get blisters and things, because you're going such a long way, and like you don't change your shoes or anything or change your socks? How do you manage with blisters and things like that? What are your essential bits of gear?
Well, the spine, actually, I would manage to usually get 2 or 3 shoe changes in with socks as well. But still, the important thing is to have the best gear you can get, basically. It's one of the, a lot of times you can get away with the 80% gear, the gear that would be good enough for 80% of the time. The cheap stuff you can pick up in Lidl and Aldi or whatever. We'll get you through the short races, no problem. But for something like the spine, you're putting your life on the line out there, because like I was saying earlier, you can be on the Cheviot Hills and no one else is out there. If the weather turns, you're totally responsible for your own safety. You do have the safety button, but you can get yourself in situations where it might take a long time for a safety crew to get to, or there's no guarantee that the safety button will actually be in coverage to work. So in the end, you have to have the right gear that you're going to literally trust your life in it. And that is how important it is. So I am extremely lucky to be sponsored by Columbia. And when I first started getting sponsored by Columbia, I used to think of them as a mid-range skiing brand, but boy, was I wrong. Because over the years, I actually work with their development team these days, which is great. And the technology they use is leading stuff, so that waterproof stuff is outstanding. The out-dry stuff, it's revolutionary compared to Gore-Tex, and literally, I do trust my life in it. And it's great now. You see more and more people using it. Johan turns up to the spine, and now he's wearing the out-dry because he saw me or Johan turned up to Barkley in the out-dry stuff because he saw me in the spine. spine and realised how effective it was, this kind of thing. So having the really, really good gear there, it's, if nothing else, it's a big psychological advantage as well as being a physical advantage, because when you have the right gear and you can trust it, that, you know, your mind's going to be in a better place, you're going to be more confident about what you're doing and your ability to get around the course. So I take a lot of effort to learn the gear. Also, coming from a mountaineering background is very useful from taking on these kind of races, because quite often, I know last year someone heard me say something about going up to Crossfell, which I said to the aid station, don't let anyone dress like a runner go up there. And what I meant by that was, you need to know when to put on the mountaineering level clothes versus the running level clothes. You know, you got these lightweight running jackets, which will get you so far. It'll be good enough for most conventional running races, but you know, if you're going up into big hills and you're going to be up there for most of the day in extreme conditions of driving, wind-driven snow and things like that, quite often that's the point at which the running gear will break down and go beyond its design limits, whereas the mountaineering gear will still be holding up because it's designed to go into that kind of environment. So quite a lot of the gear I get would be what I would rate as mountaineering level gear, although shoes tends to be just the rugged end of running shoes. But again, I would say people who do the likes of the spine and hill walking boots, it's usually a very intelligent, logical decision, and they end up actually having quite comfortable races as a result. They're going slower, but they're going to get around to more likely to get around to the end. Is if you have to have a sort of a much higher standard of running shoes, and also be able to put up with a lot more discomfort if you're going to take the running shoes. And there's a balance there, you know, there always is. And you have to, again, one of those things you work out for yourself where you want to be on the balance. But I always try and push to the survival side rather than the lightweight side. And even last week when I was down in Patagonia and we got hit by the first winter storm of the season down there, because they're going into their winter, and it turned out to be a great race because it was so snowy, and it was quite an epic race for that reason. But I had a rucksack overpacked because I had all my just in case gear. So I had a pair of mitts which you could happily take to the Himalayas. You know, they're really, if the brown stuff hit the fan, they were what you wanted. And I actually did use the same pair of mitts up at the achievements in the spine this year, and walking around in really bad weather, happy as Larry, because I had two really warm layers, you know, a really good jacket and a really good pair of mitts. So I was running on frozen ground, but I was super comfortable because I was still warm. So, you know, sometimes the heavier stuff can actually make you go faster because you're more comfortable, and as a result, you're actually in a mentally better place, which allows you to physically perform better. So gear can be very important, very, very important, and the more arduous the race, the more important it is.
Definitely. And do you ever get blisters? I never see really any pictures. Oh, on Twitter, Eoin Keith's feet, oh my god, they're going to fall off. Like, you never see that. Like, are your feet just fine?
It's rare. My feet have gotten better over the years, and it's certainly something that putting in the miles, putting in the hard yards in the training pays off for that. My feet have toughened up over the years. When I first started doing ultras, I certainly remember the 24-hour races. The thing that used to get me was tired feet, just wanting to get the weight off the feet, lie down and put the feet in the air for about 12 hours because my feet were just tired. And I don't get that anymore. And my only conclusion is that's because I've literally run them into shape over the years of just miles and miles and miles and miles of getting used to it. And that's another benefit of doing the long runs in the hills especially, is you pound them into shape and you get them used to it. And so that's an aspect. And as a result, they're definitely tougher. I mean, they're ugly things, but they're tougher.
I don't think feet are meant to look good.
Yeah. And this is also where the gear comes in, because one of the things I do, I wear waterproof shoes quite a lot in hill races, which people are reluctant to do because they know that if you wear waterproof shoes and water gets in, it'll trap the water. But that's true. But the reason I use waterproof shoes a lot is not to keep out water, it's to keep out grit and dirt. And I especially like to wear the waterproof shoes which have the built-in waterproof gaiters. And I have a couple of pairs of Columbia shoes which are brilliant for that, the Mountain Mascus. And so in Ushuaia, I actually got to the end of the race, took off my shoes and socks and looked at them in disbelief because they were absolutely pristine. They were actually in better shape than before I'd started because they were cleaner because the water got it. But,
so a waterproof shoe with a waterproof gaiter coming up, that's pretty much just a flexible hiking boot, isn't it?
In a lot of ways.
It's like a running hiking boot.
Yeah, a very flexible, lightweight running hiking boot. That's pretty much the way I look at it. Yeah. But again, the idea is to keep the grit out rather than the water out, and I don't panic about water getting in. And so less water gets in than you think. Like I've immersed many times. I've immersed my feet way beyond the gaiter depth, but the pressure of the water actually pushes the gaiter against the skin, so less water. It doesn't flow in the way you think it would.
Yeah, and presumably, like a wetsuit, then the water stays in and gets warm, and you've got a nice warm soggy foot.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I wear things like power stretch leggings. Is the same reason. You kind of get a wetsuit effect off that as well, where if they're wet, it's your own water being warmed up by your own body temperature. And as long as they're not too windy, you'll get away with that for quite a long time. And yeah, I do think there is that wetsuit effect with your own wet, soggy socks in there. But having said that, sometimes in this year's Spine, I was surprised I got through about 2/3 of it with fairly dry feet because the shoes were actually doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing, and I was able to dodge the puddles well enough so that I wasn't immersing it that far that anything got in, which quite often in the Spine you don't get away with that because you just go up to your knees a lot of the time and forget it. Don't even think about it.
Fantastic. Well, there's one thing that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the food side of things, which I'm really interested about because we've been through mental training and physical training, and then some gear, and then why the endurance, and sleep deprivation, but food and drink. John Gardner has a question for you, and he says, would you say that you're fat adapted? Meaning, do you rely on fat to some extent to fuel your long runs? And if yes, how did you do that? Because I think a lot of people want to know how to do that, or if they should do that.
Yes, is the short answer. I think I am. And I kind of discovered it I did it accidentally before discovering the theory. It was one of those things that I accidentally became good at through adventure racing, because I was the navigator in most of the adventure racing teams, and quite often that meant that before a race you'd spend about 12 hours leading up to the start of the race just managing maps and marking them in and drawing the course, and being absolutely paramount you don't make a mistake, because if you make a mistake marking the map, the implications come 4 days later when you're totally sleep deprived, and it might take you literally hours to figure out that actually it's not that you're in the wrong place, so that you marked the wrong place on the map, and that really difficult thing to figure out. So it's really important to concentrate before the race to get the maps done right. But the result uptake of that was that I would quite often start the race deprived of food because I didn't have time to eat or anything like that. So I'd be starting deprived, and then I wouldn't be the kind of person who'd be on like some of my teammates would hear the watches go beep every half an hour and say, everybody eat, and I'd say yeah, whatever, and I wouldn't eat because I didn't feel like eating. So and I was eating a lot less. And over the years I figured out actually one real meal a day would be more than enough to get through a full 24 hours of solid racing. And all this theory about needing to eat every 20 minutes and keep up your fuel levels, I figured out it was all rubbish without actually having any alternatives. But I knew it was wrong because I was outperforming people who were trying to match that theory, and I was totally going the opposite direction and having no downsides, and if anything, doing better. So I knew the theory was wrong there, but I didn't know what the alternative was until one of my ultra-running buddies, Barry Murray, who is another Irish ultra-runner, and he's also a sports scientist and nutritionist. And so he said he was going to give us all in the Irish team nutrition talk. Now I was sort of going, here we go again, I'll hear all about the carb loading. But no, Barry went out for a log row with Barry, and Barry was the opposite. Barry told me all about fat adaptation and how it worked and so on. And I was going, yeah, that actually makes sense. And that's what I've actually been doing. And with the knowledge that Barry gave me and some good links about where to read and so on, I built up the science background, and that allowed me to go from being a sort of accidental fat adapter to a more focused fat adapter, and just fine tune things, and add the confidence of having the science behind it. So that had me away in a hack. And so I've, with plenty of confidence, have done things like I do most of my 24-hour races without eating anything.
Really?
Just totally on liquids, and the liquids are chosen because I like them, but no other reason. So I drink a lot of fruit juices when I can, because I like the taste of fruit juices. They
so
also
you
have
are taking on sugar, but just not as eating it. You're drinking
not
sugar.
easily, yeah, drinking it, but at the same time, I reckon I could do it on water and be absolutely fine. Like I say, the reason I do fruit juice is because it's my favorite drink. It's as simple as that. I don't get bored of it. These days, a lot of that gets mixed in with things like milk, because again, it's for the taste, and I find that milk is easy on the stomach as well. And after a while, the fruit juice can become a bit acidic. I used to get obsessive about Coke in races until I had too much Coke in the Tour de France one year, and I vomited a load of up, and that put me off Coke for about a year.
Oh no!
Which is that's actually a good thing, because I used to get absolutely ridiculously focused running into aid stations and Coke, and if it wasn't there, it was a problem. So it's better to be able to adapt to a range of things. So I just go for what I want to have.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the UTMB Ushuaia last week, I actually transported all my race food all the way around, didn't touch it once.
Wow.
And actually got away with just drinking a few bits of coffee in the aid stations, and grabbing a few bits of fruit. And I actually only used 2 water bottles of fruit juice for the entire thing, which I was surprised, because the temperature was lower. I mean, a high temperature race, you'd take on a lot more. And you have to be aware of that. But still, you can get away with drinking less. And it's one of those things, over the years, I never used to eat when I was training, and then that became deliberate. That not only would I not eat when I was training, I'd start to leave as long a gap as possible. So those weekend long runs, I just get up in the morning and go. And, so it's a huge gap from the night before since I've eaten. So I go off in a food deprived state and do a 6-hour run, and usually arrive in it not hungry. And so last weekend I actually did exactly that, and didn't eat till 10 in the evening, 4 or 5 hours after I'd finished running, just because I knew once I start eating I probably wouldn't stop, because I sort of triggered that point at which, okay, I can start jumping. So you can train yourself. Yeah. So I've trained myself over the years to be fat adapted, and probably the longest I've gone without significant eating was in one of those flat 6-day races. The first one I did was in New York, and I think I went about 5 days, basically without eating anything. And only started eating because I was so far in front that the racing aspect was no longer a factor. So I thought, I'll just go and enjoy some food now.
Yeah. I'll just get a pizza.
So the only thing I'd eaten was things like ice cream, because it was in the middle of the day, because it was warm, and ice cream was very refreshing and just a great thing to have. But you can get once you realize what you can do when you're fat adapted, it gives you confidence. In ultra racing, there's no downsides as far as I'm concerned. There's huge upsides, and it's a virtuous circle. You're taking out dependencies. A lot of people have a dependency on food, which means they either carry huge amounts of it, and if they run out of it, they panic. I've seen that in my adventure racing teammates. I'm quite often distributing food left, right, and centre in adventure races, because I'm carrying tons of it and I don't actually need it. And if you don't have that, that's a big advantage. If you reach an aid station, they've run out of stuff, you don't care, because just carry on, and you're eating for leisure rather than eating for need, and it's a big upside. Plus, there's other upsides to not eating. Is you're far less likely to get stomach distress if you're not piling stuff in, particularly things like gel, which are just and most too much sugar, even if it's the nicest food in the world, just becomes too much in the end. So doing anything over multi-days, you gotta mix it up, and you gotta have a variety. Certainly when I did probably my best run ever was running the length of Ireland, Misenhead to Manonhead, and again I did that on very little food, no full meals. Just I think the biggest thing I had was a bit of Christmas cake, which I picked up from my mother as I went down, but I had a huge variety of liquids because I knew I'd be drinking a lot. But the key thing was the variety, because if I didn't have the variety, I'd get sick of whatever it was. And, so I had fruit juices plus Coke plus Fanta plus, shakes and and about 10 different things. And it was, pick and choose, pick and choose, pick and choose. Whereas if I tried to do it in one or two things, I'd have got sick in it and probably, just spend time trying to think about what I could possibly do and getting into a panic. And again, it's that variety is the key.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So taking like juices rather than food. Yeah, that's a really nice thing to do. I suppose if you're running around a track, you can get the juice.
It's technical reasons. It's literally for the mental reason that's just what I like.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Some people are saying on the live chat, a variety of liquids. Did you stop at the pub?
I actually don't drink alcohol these days.
Yeah,
I used to when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't be bothered these days. No, didn't stop at a pub.
That's funny. And so just before you go, Eoin, I know that you've been doing some of the new UTMB races. Do you want to just tell us about those before we leave you tonight?
It's been a bit of a project these days. I've just turned 50, so I've kind of got this idea into my head one day out running, and which was because I wanted to do something having turned 50 for, it's kind of, I try to take the upside of it, that I'm in the new age category, so I just decided, what can I do at about 50? What would be a good thing to do? Because one of the problems with ultrarunning, of course, is that old people are actually quite good at it. So, in a lot of races, categories are meaningless, but there are age categories in the UTMB races, so I thought, hey, there's 3 or 4 UTMBs in the world, maybe I can go around and see if I can get on the podium in each one. So that's now become, in my age category, so that's now become a bit of a project of mine, and also because they're in interesting locations, I thought, well, yeah, you could actually do this as a series and you'd actually get some great races in. So I kind of rolled into UTMB Oman quite late in December last year, and I only entered it because I DNF'd in the main UTMB, which actually left me without enough points to do UTMB the following year. So I needed to get points in before the year was out, which left me with very few choices. But UTMB Oman had been nagging at me as being a really interesting place to potentially go running. So then that gave me the excuse I needed. So I saw it, I'll just go do it. And it turned out to be a really fantastic race, really, really highly technical running ground, and surprisingly unsandy. Because you think of Oman, you think, Arabia, the desert and so on. But actually it's in a beautiful mountain range and really rocky terrain rather than sandy terrain. Because I thought I might need sand gaiters, but not at all. Just ran it in non-waterproof shoes the whole way, and it's fine. But really rocky, really technical. A lot of people didn't like it because it was so technical, but I loved it because it was so technical. Again, it took a lot of concentration to go around at speed, and amazing scenery. Probably the only downside of it being a long race is because you do half of it at night, and you're missing out on some great scenery, even though the running conditions are actually perfect at night. In daytime it was warm but not too warm, but you're seeing this awesome scenery, whereas nighttime it was absolutely perfect running conditions, but you just knew you were running past great scenery but couldn't see a thing. So that was a great race. I really enjoyed it, and I have every intention of going back to it if I can. And they're making it longer this year, hopefully, because the longer the better as far as I'm concerned. And then, another race, having got that little project in my head, I was wondering, would I get UTMB Ushuaia in this year? Because I thought that just a little close to it, but I had just enough time to get myself entered, and thanks to Columbia actually, because they were one of the sponsors, so I was able to get in on a sponsor's entry there, and it turned out to be a much better race than I was anticipating, because I was thinking, one of the downsides of southern Patagonia would be quite like the UK and Ireland in terms of climate, but actually it turned out to be more extreme because, as I said, we got hit by that winter storm, which really turned it from a tough race into a bit of an epic race. So I was out there at times thinking, on climbing the hills covered in snow, thinking, yeah, the snow is just like the spine, and the hills at times are steep enough to be like Barkley. So it was a real combination. And then the one thing that sort of was good and bad at the same time, it was so stormy they had to take out two of the hills and they routed us around the roads. And that's where it's useful being both a road runner and a hill runner, because I knew what to do on the roads. And looking back in the paces, I paced out exactly my 24-hour pace when I hit the road sections. So, that can work well. But overall, it turned out to be a tremendous race. And I had a lot of fun out there. Met Rory Bosio for the first time out
She's
there.
awesome.
She is awesome.
I love her.
She is brilliant, and I think I spent most of the race within a couple of hundred meters of her, because we were almost on exactly the same pace. So yeah, good conversations out there. So that was great, and so it turned out to be a brilliant experience. And I'd never been to South America, so I got the whole new continent experience as well, which I thought was great. And getting the extreme trails in a new place in good weather, that was super. So really enjoyed it. Again, it was another race where a lot of people, I think, may not have enjoyed it because of the storms, but it's one of those ones where you embrace it, and it turns out to be a lot of fun. When you have the right gear and you know what you're doing, and you kind of, even at the race breaking beforehand, they were talking about all this stuff like the weather could be harsh and extreme, and the ground could be very wet. But they were describing something which, I was just thinking, they're describing a bog. I've mentioned bogs loads of times. This is no problem, and this is exactly the way it turns out. So again, it's one of those things where experience pays off, and off you go.
Definitely. And those races sound really, really good. But what about future races? Like James Frost wants to know, have you got any plans to run Badwater?
I'd love to give it a go, but again, it's there's so many races I'd love to give it a go. There's all these epic bucket list ones, definitely. Most of them I'd love to give a go. The likes of Badwater, the likes of Hard Rock, Western States, because they're classics. I've done a lot of the classics, which I'm very happy about. I've done Spartathlon, I've done UTMB, I've done Barkley, probably the hardest of the classics to get into. So there are definitely things like that, yeah. And even something that's relatively easy to get into, which I must get to at some point, would be Comrades, just because, the history of it. And races of history like that are always good to get to.
And what about some stage races? I know you like the non-stop ones, but what about some stage multi-days? Like Robert Montgomery says, do you fancy the Dragon's Back race, for example?
I'd love to run it non-stop, but stage just doesn't interest me, to be perfectly honest about it. It just makes it into a series of sprints as far as I'm concerned, whereas I like the more grinding nature of the non-stops. Stages to me are more like, from my perspective, they're more like the kind of cheating, taking out the challenge and turning it into a bit too easy. So I definitely like to take on the non-stops. So there's still plenty of them out there that they're pretty interesting. Another one that we haven't mentioned so far is the Tour de Gaunt, which is a classic race as well. And that's really epic and one of my favorite races to do. And it's one I'd happily go back to.
Yeah. So you want to run all the classic, really long ones. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, we have kept you for a long while tonight, Eoin. It's been absolutely fantastic to speak with you.
Yeah, time has flown along. I'm just looking at the clock now. Wow, that was a really fast hour.
I know. Yeah, and you're getting so much love from the channel. So loads of people are saying happy birthday, Eoin, for your 50th. They wanted to know, when were you 50?
I was back in October.
Oh, in October. Okay, well, they're all saying happy birthday. Kurt Steed is saying happy birthday. Robert Montgomery, Running Ram, they're all saying happy birthday. And loads of people have really, really loved the broadcast. So we've got Guy Greatorex saying, what a funny, jolly, happy, smiley person ever. Most enjoyable interview to date. That's amazing, isn't it? That's fantastic. And John Gardner is saying, terrific show. Great interaction between the two of you. Thanks, Eoin and Claire. Mark C is saying great show as well. Kurt Steed is saying awesome, this is great. Like, everyone's just saying loads of really nice stuff. Oh, and Robert Montgomery wants to know your 24-hour pace.
24-hour pace, I aim for around 10 kilometers an hour and try and exceed it if I can. So my PB is 248 kilometers, which is a bit over 150 miles in non-metric. And it's the Irish record and one of the ones I'm most proud of. It took me I had the Irish record, then I lost it. It took me about 10 years to get it back, so now I treasure it. And I broke the record by 40 meters or something like that,
wow.
which is nothing in 24-hour racing terms.
That's nothing.
That's great thin,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm
yeah,
that was hard work.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, so it stays for ages. Yeah, maybe it'll be like the Bob Graham round record and stay for 36 years.
Otherwise, I hope not, because it's good to see other people coming along. But it's honestly, I like it being mine.
Yeah, fantastic. But we've got loads of other people just muscling in there now that they know that the show is ending. So Sean Lockhart saying, great interview. Robert Montgomery saying, thank you for answering that last question about pacing. Nick Pepperell is saying, thank you, great insights. And Running Ram said he had a great evening. Thank you, Ian. And Sally Gilson says, thoroughly enjoyable tonight. So that is absolutely incredible. So yeah, there'll be tons of people will be watching this later as well. So they'll all catch up with the broadcast later on whenever they can make it. But I'd just like to say thank you so much, Ian, for being with us tonight. And I'm going to end the live broadcast now, and we'll say bye to everybody on the live chat. And thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.